Thanks for joining the program. And guest is Kent Hovind. Kent is the host of the official Dr. Dino website. He's a preacher. He's an expert on the issue of creationism. Kent, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
You know, Kent, I got into this subject years ago when I very innocently wrote an article that was, I believe, published at Newsmax. This was like in 2002, around that time, where I questioned the validity of the theory of evolution. Now, I didn't really come at this from necessarily a religious standpoint. I just was saying, you know, there is some questions about a theory that we've all accepted as absolute science all of our lives. And there was a good growing body of work and scientists who are questioning that theory. And I got really incredible hate mail for that, including from conservatives. People, and it was very personal. I mean, you know, people making all sorts of nasty comments. And I think that when you question something that is so accepted as a matter of faith, people get very upset at you. And I'll simply mention also that this resulted in my writing a book on the topic called The Apostles of Evolution, where I looked at the politics of evolution. And when I ran for Congress in Massachusetts in 2004, I was debating my opponent, Representative Barney Frank, on television. And he turned to me immediately and said, "Do you realize that Mr. Moscowitz doesn't accept the theory of evolution?" And, you know, he said it in a way that this should be enough to disqualify me from holding office or even from existing in life. I mean, it was so outraged. And throughout that whole campaign, where we got into a lot of nasty debates, I never saw him angrier when he brought that up. There is something about that theory of evolution that is such a cornerstone of the faith of the left-leaning establishment that it made me realize that everything that they believe in is based upon the claim of that theory. Tell me how you got into this issue.
Well, when you're discussing the word evolution, you have to define what you mean exactly, because there are 6 different meanings to the word. And you don't accept evolution, you believe in evolution. And tell Barney Frank he needs to call me. But when I moved to Pensacola, Florida, about 30 years ago, I'd been teaching high school science and math for 15 years. And I moved to Pensacola. And I'd only been there a couple of days. And the neighbor kid said, "Hey, would you like to take the paper? I throw the newspaper." I said, "No, I don't have a parakeet." But I said, "If you got an extra, throw it in the yard once in a while and try to talk me into it." So he threw it in the yard, and I looked at it, and there was an article in there that said dinosaur bones were found in Montana from 80 million years ago or something like that. And so I wrote my first ever letter to the editor. I said, "No, these dinosaur bones they found are from one that drowned in the flood in the days of Noah. The earth is not millions of years old. The dinosaurs lived with man all through history. They called them dragons. And so these bones they found are from one that drowned in the flood in the days of Noah." And they published my letter and started a war in Pensacola in the newspaper. Atheists writing back and forth and me writing back and forth. Anyway, finally, some students called me from the University of West Florida, and they said, "Mr. Hovind, would you come debate one of our professors? He's reading all your letters to the editor in our anthropology class." Well, I had never had a debate in my life except with my wife, and I lost those every time. But I said, "Sure." So I did my first ever debate, 1990, on creation versus evolution. And there's about 1,000 people there, and a whole bunch of pastors came, and they said, "Wow, this is great stuff you've got on science and the Bible. Would you come share this at our church?" And so that led very quickly to a full-time ministry of me traveling and speaking all over the world on the topic of the scientific accuracy of the Bible. So that was my journey, start a fight, and everybody came to watch.
And I mean, it's because it's such a divisive issue, and I want to delve into the actual issue itself a little bit here, and point out that the science, or as you might say, the pseudoscience of evolution consists of a couple of very, really incredible premises, and that is, number one, that life came from nothing. Life came from death, basically. Darwin believed that he said that all life in his notebook came from a warm, small pond. That somehow inanimate objects crashing together over 1 billion years out pops some life. Now, that doesn't make sense, not only from a religious standpoint, of course, but even from a scientific standpoint, because you cannot make something out of nothing. You have to have something in order for there to be another something. It doesn't just happen. You can't smash two rocks together and out pops life, no matter how many billions of times you do it. So right off the bat, the whole theory is questionable. And then it gets into this whole race theory, right? Basically a breeding theory, that over umpteen billion years or however long, various species or the original species would mate with other members of the species who are superior, and out would pop over time a new species, a more advanced species. And then they would mate together and they would pick the superior members of the species. And again, the process would continue until you have man. So we're basically a product of breeding. It's a breeding theory. And that if you take that theory on its premise, you have to conclude, there's really no other way around it, that some people, some human beings, some members of our species, so-called, are superior to others, literally, because we can't all be at the same evolution all over the world. It's a process. I mean, if you look at the science of this. So by nature, it's a racist theory. And in fact, Darwin scientized racism in a big way. I mean, you could look at his notes in his diary and in his second book in particular. And he viewed, for example, the Aboriginal people of Australia as closer to the ape than man. He viewed Irish people as less than English people, in evolution. So, he was very blatant about this racism, and it was a racism that continued with eugenics. But even though the evolutionary people, the theorists of today, will deny this, it has to be viewed that way because that's the only way their scientific theory will work. Ken?
Yes. Okay, you cut out for a second there. Well,
okay.
I've done 215 debates now on creation versus evolution. And I've learned the first thing you have to do is define the word evolution. Exactly what are we talking about here? Because there are 6 different levels or meanings or stages to the word. First would be cosmic evolution, the origin of time, space, matter from the Big Bang, which is absolutely ludicrous. There's no evidence for that at all. Then there would have to be chemical evolution, because the Big Bang produced hydrogen. Well, how do we get helium, lithium, and all the other 92 elements from hydrogen? So they have to have the elements evolve. Then you have to have stellar evolution. The stars have to form themselves somehow. Nobody's ever seen that happen. All we see are stars blowing up. Then you have to have organic evolution. That's life getting started from non-living material. Nobody's ever seen that.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have macroevolution. That's changes into a different kind of animal. Nobody's ever seen a horse produce a non-horse or a dog produce a non-dog, period. Never been seen.
Never.
And then microevolution, which is variations within the same kind. Like the dog and the wolf probably had a common ancestor, and it looked like a dog. That is microevolution. That is not proof that bananas are related to whales. So that if you define the word carefully, if they say, do you believe in evolution? I say, well, what do you mean? Well, changes. Yeah, I believe there's changes, but they're limited to the same kind, just like God said would happen.
Exactly. And that what they've done as a sort of a little bit of a shifting of the table is they've claimed that adaptation is actual evolution, when it's not. Adaptation's fine. We do have different species, including the human beings. We do adapt to different atmospheres and environments over time. That's why white people have such fair skin, because they live in the northern part of the earth and they need to have more sunlight so that they can survive, whereas darker people live closer to the equator because they want to protect their bodies from too much sunlight, since the sun shines more brightly there. So there are variations, there are adaptations to environment on the part of human beings and on the part of animals and plants, for that matter. And yet, but first of all, that's not evolution. You're not popping out a new species. We're all the same. We're all human beings, whether we're black or white or other colors. And the idea that this would be a part of evolution, again, is racist. It is saying that one of these groups is more evolved than another. on their way to popping up this new supposed species. And it does further scientize racism because, so what say you, Kent?
Well, I agree. Racism, the only way to have racism at all is to think that one race, and actually there's only one race called the human race, but
Exactly.
they think that one skin color is superior to another skin color, or like the British thought the Irish were inferior, etc. That really, the only way you're going to justify that is based upon evolution, because the Bible says clearly that all nations are of one blood, Acts chapter 17.
Exactly.
And obviously we came from Adam and Eve. Eve's the mother of all living. So there's just no scriptural reason for racism. But if you want to hate somebody who's a different nationality, you have to have a justification, and evolution is the only one I'm aware of that they use.
Right. And also, I mean, going back to the scientific community, there is a growing body of scientists who now believe that we all, as human beings, are descended from one mother and one father. They call it the microbial Eve and the Y chromosome Adam, I guess. There's some scientific name for it. And that, however that happened, there is more, if we're going to look at theories of creation, there's actually more reason to look at the creation as it's described in the Bible than this crazy, Darwinian idea that we all came out of the primordial ooze. And, to me, it seems more obvious, even just as a simple a look at that we did all descend from one mother and one father. However that happened, we don't know all the mysteries of it because a lot of that is, of course, hidden. It's not revealed in the Bible. And yet what we do know makes basic sense. And it's something that's been understood by many, if not every culture in the world at different times, not just, the Judeo-Christian world.
Yeah, I mean, it's just obvious. Somebody had to design this place. Things just don't happen by themselves, without intelligent input.
Yes.
And there's so much complexity. One single cell in your body is more complicated than the space shuttle. As far as I know, the most complex machine ever built by man. And you got 100 trillion cells in one person's body. And did they think it happened?
Right. Is that like just somehow it happened magically because things are crashing together? I mean, even Darwin himself in his diary reported that when he saw the feather of a peacock, he felt sick. He felt ill. In fact, he was ill most of his life, probably because of his conscience. I don't know. But he said that because the incredible amount of intricate facets going into that single feather, the various perfect shapes and the colors. I mean, if you look at the eye of a bee under a microscope, it has millions of variations of shade, all perfectly lined up, all perfectly shaped. That doesn't just happen by accident. That's not an issue of breeding. That has an intelligent design.
But see, they don't want to believe there's a designer. The Bible says in 2 Peter chapter 3, they are willingly ignorant. They don't want the idea of there being a God telling them what to do. That's the bottom line every time that I've seen. I've done all these debates with people, and I tell them, what evidence do you have of any animal ever producing a different kind of animal? There's none. But
that's right.
They'd rather believe they came from a rock. It's just insane, in my humble opinion.
There you go. Okay. Kent Hovind is my guest. drdino.com is the website, Creation Ministry. So, Kent, since unless there's anyone who wants to refute this, and they certainly are welcome to comment on my chat, I think we've established that evolution is a farce, and that really the biblical creation story is, even though we can't know everything because we're not God, we're human beings, it's an outline for the creation of the world and the creation of the human race created in the image of God. So why then would they be so determined to try to overthrow this idea? I mean, that's what my book is all about, but I want to hear you comment.
Well, 2 Peter chapter 3 says the scoffers in the last day will be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment because they walk after their own lust. They don't want a God telling them thou shalt not commit adultery. They don't like God's rules. So the
Yes.
only reason I can see to reject the obvious creation story is because you don't want God telling you what to do. They don't like the authority. It's an authority issue. Actually it's a problem of the heart. It's sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all true, and I think that the only thing I'd add to that is I think that goes back to the original sin in the Garden of Eden, when the serpent, who represents the forces of Satan, cajoled Eve and tempted Eve to violate the single rule that God put in place, which was that they were not to partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And thus the serpent said, if you take the fruit, you will know good and evil. You will know right and wrong. You'll know everything that God knows. And so Eve took the fruit, and when she gave it to Adam also, they entered into a conspiracy together to overthrow God. And that's what's going on in every generation ever since. That's what the theory of evolution is all about. They want to say that it is we, the human being, who is the creator of the universe, not God. We are and then they set themselves up as the enlightened ones, the scientists, the social scientists, and we're going to create man. We're going to fashion man in our image by use of coercion and social control, because we are overthrowing God in heaven. We don't recognize the authority of God. That's what it's all about. That's what Jesus dealt with when he met the Satan in the desert. I mean, this is the struggle that man has with God, and with Satan. That Satan tempted Eve to try to overthrow God in heaven and be as God, to know what God knows. And so I see that as a big piece of what this is about.
Yeah, Lucifer wants to be like God. Ezekiel 28, Isaiah 14, Genesis chapter 3. He wants God's job, but the job's not available. One thing, God knows everything. So Satan wants to try to know everything. And I think that's what a lot of this modern technology is going to be used for. I mean, just with this cell phone I'm holding, and they can tell every place I've been with this phone since I had it. They can go back, know everything about me.
It's true, and we all are basically functioning within that because we want to use that technology, and when it's in these corrupt hands of people who want to control who we are, what we do, where we go, whatever, then it's a very dangerous thing, and it is something that as Americans, especially because the U.S. Constitution recognizes and is based upon the biblical premise that we're all created in the image of God, and that God is the ultimate sovereign. He grants limited sovereignty to us as individuals, and then we, in turn, grant limited sovereignty to a government. And they want to subvert that because that is the order of the universe. That is what God had in mind. That is the logos, as they say in Greek, or the nomos, as they say in the Talmud. That is the law, or Tao, as they say in ancient Chinese scriptures. It is something that they want to control. They want to overthrow that. And my book gets into the very direct connection between the theory of evolution as the underpinning theory and philosophy, both of Nazism and communism. Right. And because if you have this idea that man can evolve, and therefore the scientists are going to try to advance that by evolving us faster, by breeding us, by controlling us, like we're cordwood, deciding who lives and who dies. And that feeds directly into the whole political systems that are trying to collectivize humanity, control humanity, totally remove the concept of the individual under God and replace it with some kind of a collective control by them.
Yeah, and it's coming like a freight train, brother. It's coming. We're headed for disaster. I wrote a book called What on Earth is About to Happen, for heaven's sake, about what the Bible teaches about the future. You can get it on our website, drdino.com, or they can call 855-BIG-DINO, like a big dinosaur. Talk to our secretary. But I really think it starts this year or next year, the tribulation time. I think we're headed for royal trouble. It's going to get really bad for Christians, especially in the next 7 years. So I'll hang in there. If you're not born again, if you've never been saved, I would check on that first. Be sure you're one of God's kids. And if you are, then find something to do for the kingdom. There's a war going on. Get busy.
Right, and I speaking as a religious Jew and as a Zionist, I'm with you completely, shoulder to shoulder, in that I think that Judaism needs to reestablish its genuine mission as a covenant between Israel and God, and get away from this subversive influence that has wormed its way into the fabric of our faith, and bring us back to the order of the universe and the mission that God originally asked us to take on at Sinai, which is to take on an extra layer of holiness and an extra layer of responsibility, and set the stage. So, we may differ on the particulars, and I'm not saying those are minor, but nevertheless, I think that we're on the same side in terms of reasserting the order of God's vision and God's order of the universe. And as Jews, we talk about knowing God, at least Jews who believe in God, and that's another story. But moving forward, Kent, what do you see as the specific threats that are going to come down the pike, and how can we not only inoculate ourselves against those threats, but how can we now take on a proactive position to counter them and to stave them off?
Well, the Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. People do crazy things for money. Ever since God cursed Adam and Eve in the garden, he said, Adam, you're going to have to work for a living, son. You're going to have to plow the ground. You're going to have to work. Ever since that day, people have tried to get out of that curse, either by making somebody else work and you steal their stuff, or slavery, or, the Jews have experienced plenty of that in their history.
Exactly, yeah.
You work hard, earn a bunch of stuff, and then we'll take it away from you, basically is what it amounts to. So it goes back to trying to get out of work. So what's happened here in the last probably the last 100 years particularly, people have learned that instead of using gold and silver for currency to exchange, let's get paper money. And whoever prints the paper money is going to make some profit off of this because it's cheap. It's cheap to make a $100 bill. And now they've learned they can use plastic credit cards, and whoever controls the credit card company gets 2 or 3 or 5% of every transaction. How would you like to get 2 or 3% of everything ever bought? Well,
yeah, I mean, pretty good payday. And also, not to mention the fact that the credit card now with computers can keep track of everything you do. Every time you buy a pack of gum, they know about it. I mean, they can watch, all of your habits. I mean, money gives you a sense of freedom in that you get to decide your own lifestyle, and you don't have to, be answerable to anyone. So, cash is disappearing. As you say, I mean, the gold standard has been gone since 1970, and now it's being replaced by blips on a computer screen that can be manipulated and observed. So we do hear now rumblings because of the pandemic, and it makes me wonder if this is what the pandemic is all about. I know I don't want to put on too much of a tin hat here, but I'm going to say it anyway, that there is talk about the cashless society and the chip implanted, which is very much out of the book of Revelation. This is the idea, and I've seen some videos of people actually talking about this at MIT in a positive way, that, this is a wonderful thing. I think it's a very, very frightening prospect, and we're being set up for that. Don't have it. Don't let it happen, is my advice to people.
Well, it's interesting. In the King James Bible, it says in Revelation 13 and Revelation 14 that the Antichrist will cause everybody to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Almost all the other translations have changed it to say on the right hand or on the forehead, changing one letter.
Of course.
Major difference. The microchip implant, which has been developed since it was 1990s, a little chip they can put into you can go to the vet and get your dog chip, little microchip put under the skin. And if he ever gets lost, anybody can find it, and the vet can scan it and say, this is Fido, he belongs over here. So the farmers have been chipping their animals for a long time, microchipping. And many people, many thousands of people already are microchipped right now. It's a voluntary process, but I suspect it's going to be something that's going to be.
I had not heard that. Who is being microchipped now? I mean, is it prisoners or what's going on?
Well, on my video number 7, which is question answer, I cover about 20 minutes with everything documented on this microchip and how it follows if you look at the barcode on any product, those little black and white lines, every one of them starts with a 6, has a 6 in the middle, which is the two long extended lines, and a 6 at the end. They used to mark them back in 72 when they first invented the barcode. They were labeled 666. They quickly took that off, but they're still there. Two skinny lines is the computer code for 6. So they get my video number 7, which is question answer. My whole series is 18 hours and it's $50. And you can watch it, return it, and get your money back, minus the shipping. I used to loan stuff out, but I quickly learned that Baptists especially don't steal, but they do borrow and never return. So you buy it for $50, watch it, and then send it back. But video 7 to cover 20 minutes of an answer to that question, giving examples of people being microchipped. There are many thousands.
No, I mean, I'm not doubting that at all. And it's very, very troubling. And if we do that, then we've really compromised our freedom to a point that's probably almost irreparable. And, you know, I could see this pandemic, however it happened, whether it's a biological weapon or whether it's natural, it doesn't even matter. The point is that it can be, and it very well might be used as an excuse to launch such a program. And so we have to be very careful and very vigilant in these times.
Well, it's a way to monitor everybody. They want to know what you bought, why, you know, where you live, how much money you spend, and it's really a control issue. But again, whoever controls that computer and that system is going to get 2 to 3 to 5% of every transaction you make. You cannot buy or sell. Well, if you had $10,000 right now in Confederate money, what could you buy with it?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's worthless.
The Federal Reserve notes are equally worthless. We just don't realize it yet. I mean, I could get $10 million in monopoly money right now. You couldn't buy a pack of gum.
That's right. It's all based on the full faith and credit. People they think it's worth something, so it's worth something. And, you know, we could have a really good talk about this. I also wrote a book on this topic, The Art and Science of American Money, where I look at the history of how the central bankers, starting really at the time of the American Revolution and right up till today, have basically tried to control the issuance of American currency. And to a large extent, they do now. And, you know, as opposed to the constitutional issuance of currency, which is not necessarily gold and silver, although that's always a part of it, but it's just federally backed currency, you know, like what Lincoln did with the greenbacks, and you know, interest-free. You know, it's not a matter of whether banks should make money loaning money. They should, but the money itself ought to be a neutral instrument. It can't be a profitable instrument to anyone, and it is right now with the system of the central banking, and it's very corrupting, very, very dangerous. We have to know that our money is worth what it says it's worth, and so thus we can determine the value of our property and the value of our labor in an accurate way. And it's something that would not be manipulated, and basically we'd be scammed by these issuance of money. Very, very dangerous situation. Anyway, Kent, thank you so much for joining me. Let my listeners and viewers know more about you and your excellent work and where they can get your books and learn more about your ministry.
All right. Well, our website is drdino.com, DRDINO. My phone number is 855-BIG-DINO. I'm extension 3 if they want to talk to me. I'm an evangelist. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. God made the world in 6 days. I mean, in the 10 Commandments, he said that to Moses, in 6 days, the Lord made heaven and earth. That's why you have the Sabbath. Well, what did he mean by that? He meant he did it in 6 days, which means dinosaurs had to live with man. Nothing died until Adam and Eve disobeyed God's clear command. So we started a ministry 30 years ago called drdino.com, Dinosaur Adventureland. And someone gave us 140 acres up here in Lenox, Alabama, just north of Pensacola, 70 miles. Come on down. It's a blast. Everything's free. You can come stay for a couple of days. We'll put you to work. We've built the whole camp. We have 15 cabin spaces for people to live in. And we just want to glorify God for everything we do here. And we happen to believe the Messiah came and you guys missed him. So you might want to relook at that one time.
Understood. Thank you. No, and I really, want to stay in touch. I've enjoyed the conversation. I think that your advocacy and what you're preaching is probably the biggest enemy of this establishment that they have, and they're going to attack you for that. They probably already have. They certainly will attack me. And we have to know that we're fighting the good fight here, and that we're preaching the right message to people, and that the fact that they are attacking tells you everything you need to know about who they are. So anyway,
they threw me in prison for nearly 9 years for structuring. I'd never heard of structuring.
What is it?
There's a website called KentHovind.net. 8 hours about video. A paralegal did 15 months research on my case. He said, I can't believe they did that to you. You didn't break any laws at all. The government broke laws to throw you in prison.
We've learned how that works from the attack on President Trump, actually, and General Flynn and other people who are innocent and who've been dragged through the mud by these brown shirts who are trying to control the government. But Kent, that's a topic I'd like to talk with you as well on another time. We should do a show on that.
You call me anytime. All right.
I will do. Thank you, Kent Hovind. Have a great afternoon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.